Good afternoon, everyone. This is the news with b.c.begley. I am your host, and it's Wednesday, September 25th, 2025. And here are your top news stories for today. MSNBC has reported that former FBI Director James Comey may soon face indictment in federal court in Virginia, though the scope of possible charges remains unclear. The move follows the resignation of interim U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, who opposed charges, and his replacement by Trump ally Lindsey Hooligan. Prosecutors reportedly advised that there were insufficient evidence to proceed, but the 5-year statute of limitations on allegations that Comey lied to Congress in 2020 about authorizing a leak is set to expire soon. The case hinges on conflicting testimony between Comey and former FBI Director Andrew McCabe over a 2016 media disclosure, CNBC has reported. Trump, who has long targeted Comey, has publicly demanded prosecution, calling him, quote, guilty as hell. A sniper attack at a Dallas ICE facility on Wednesday left 2 migrants dead and several others wounded, before the gunman, identified as 29-year-old Joshua Jan, killed himself. Authorities said that Jan fired from a rooftop at a transport van that was carrying detainees, with bullets engraved with anti-ICE messages suggesting an ideological motive. No law enforcement officers were injured. Officials, including FBI Director Kash Patel, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Senator Ted Cruz, condemned the politically motivated violence, warning against rhetoric that fuels such attacks. ICE has raised security at facilities statewide, while Governor Greg Abbott pledged continued enforcement and deportations, the Daily Mail has reported. The Dallas shooting follows recent threats and assaults on other ICE facilities in Texas, highlighting rising tensions and targeted violence. The investigation remains ongoing. Aalborg Airport in northern Denmark was shut down Wednesday evening after unidentified drones were spotted over its airspace, just 2 days after similar incidents closed Copenhagen Airport. Police confirmed flights were diverted as they investigated, though the number and the origin of the drones remain unknown. The repeated disruptions have fueled suspicions of Russian involvement, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warning the incursions are part of Moscow's provocations against NATO states. Danish police said the drones appear to be operated by a, quote, capable actor, and the country's intelligence agency has already declared a high risk of sabotage, the U.S. Sun has reported. Analysts suggest the incidents may be part of a broader Kremlin strategy to test Europe's defenses, coinciding with recent cyber attacks on major airports across the continent. 5 bodies discovered in Houston's bayous over 5 days have sparked online speculation about a possible serial killer. Social media users have linked the deaths, but Houston police say the cases are unrelated and stress that each cause of death will be determined by autopsy. Authorities emphasize that the circumstances differ in each case and warn against jumping to conclusions, Crone has reported. Still, the city's history with infamous killers like Dean Corll the Candyman and the Texas Killing Fields cases has amplified public anxiety. Investigations remain ongoing. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is facing growing resistance from Democratic candidates across the country, many of whom are refusing to back him as leader if elected. In key races from Maine to Illinois and Iowa, numerous contenders have pledged either outright opposition or withheld support, citing frustration in what they see as outdated, ineffective leadership. While Schumer insists his focus is on winning the majority in 2026, the backlash underscores a broader push from the Democratic base for younger, more aggressive leadership. Still, history suggests Schumer may survive the rebellion, as past waves of candidate opposition against party leaders, including Nancy Pelosi, failed to unseat them, Politico has reported. For now, however, the dissent highlights inter-party tensions as Democrats head into a challenging election cycle. Police say a gunman opened fire outside the main gate of Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, a facility linked to the wider Area 51 complex. The suspect, described as acting erratically, pointed his weapon at security officers before being shot in the leg and then taken to a local area hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The base temporarily closed its main gate and rerouted traffic, but said there is no threat to the public. An investigation is ongoing, the Daily Mail has reported. While Nellis oversees training operations, Area 51 remains a separate, remote site used for classified testing. Nearly 25 suspects took part in a $1 million armed robbery at Heller Jewelers in San Ramon, California, police have said. The group used crowbars and pickaxes to smash cases before becoming trapped by automatic security doors, forcing one robber to fire a gun to escape. 6 getaway cars awaited nearby, but police, aided by drone footage and regional cooperation, have already arrested 7 suspects from Oakland, ages 17 to 31, who are linked to similar Bay Area crimes, TV6 News has reported. Authorities recovered 2 guns, stolen vehicles, and some jewelry, and warn more arrests are expected as the investigation continues. Tropical cyclone Ragasa, once the world's strongest storm of the year, weakened into a tropical depression Thursday as it moved from southern China toward Vietnam, but it left widespread damage and casualties in its wake. In China's Guangdong province, hundreds of thousands lost power, streets were flooded, and more than 10,000 trees were toppled. Over 2 million people were relocated before the storm hit. Taiwan reported 14 deaths, where floods destroyed roads, bridges, while the Philippines confirmed at least 11 deaths, including 7 fishermen. Vietnam prepared for potential flooding and evacuations as Ragasa continued west, the Associated Press has reported. Meanwhile, another storm was set to strike the Philippines on Friday with potential typhoon strength. Italy and Spain announced that they are sending ships to assist the global Suman flotilla after activists reported their aid vessels bound for Gaza were attacked by drones. The group claims Israel is behind the strikes, which they say caused explosions, damage, and communication disruptions just days before reaching Gaza. More than 500 unarmed participants from multiple countries, including Italy, Sweden, and Spain, are aboard the flotilla. A Spanish lawmaker on board described the attacks as a nightmare and called for urgent European action to protect the mission, CNN has reported. The IDF has not commented on the allegations. A massive sinkhole opened on a major road in Bangkok on Wednesday, damaging infrastructure, trapping vehicles, and forcing nearby evacuations. Officials said no one was injured, but 3 vehicles were caught in the collapse, which may have been triggered by construction at an underground train station. The sinkhole severed a 4-lane road, pulled down power poles, and damaged water pipes, prompting electricity and water shutoffs. A nearby hospital closed outpatient services for 2 days as a precaution, CBS News has reported. Crews are working urgently to stabilize the site, amid fears heavy rain during the monsoon season could worsen the damage. Here is a look at the live weather radar for today from the National Weather Service, and here is the national weather forecast for today. There's a risk of scattered downpours and a few strong to severe thunderstorms for much of the eastern seaboard on Thursday. There's also a little bit of moisture around a slow-moving upper-level low to bring rounds of showers and thunderstorms with a threat of flash flooding to parts of the southwest the next few days. There's also critical fire conditions that are going to develop across the northern Cascades into the Columbia Basin on Thursday. Okay, it's 8 past the hour, and here is the international news stories for today. At least 64 people were killed in a nighttime attack on the St. Joseph Parish in North Kivu, Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, carried out by Islamist rebel group Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF. Victims gathered for a mourning ceremony, and they were hacked, shot, or bludgeoned, and some homes were set ablaze. The ADF, which pledged allegiance to the Islamic State's Central Africa province in 2019, has a history of brutal attacks targeting Christian communities. Local authorities have begun burying the dead and increasing security, but violence persists despite the presence of Congolese, Ugandan, and UN forces, the Catholic Herald has reported. aid organizations, and church leaders have condemned the massacre and called for international intervention to protect civilians and uphold religious freedom. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a trial over alleged secret funding from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi for his 2007 presidential campaign, though he was acquitted of corruption, misuse of Libyan public funds, and illegal campaign financing. Sarkozy, who is 70 years old, denies wrongdoing and is expected to appeal. The court heard prosecutors' claims that Sarkozy and his aides struck a corruption pact with Gaddafi in 2005, promising diplomatic and business favors in exchange for campaign funds. Key allies were also convicted, while Eric Worth was acquitted. This marks Sarkozy's third high-profile conviction. He previously served an electronic tagged sentence for corruption and faces another appeal over illegal campaign spending in 2012. Despite his legal troubles, Sarkozy remains influential in French politics, The Guardian has reported. The case was further complicated by the recent death of a businessman who had claimed to deliver Libyan cash to Sarkozy's campaign. Former Malawi President Peter Mutharika has been re-elected with 56.8% of the vote, defeating incumbent Lazarus Chakwera, who received 33%. Chakwera, 70, conceded, pledging a peaceful transfer of power. The election was dominated by economic concerns, including soaring inflation, food shortages, and widespread poverty. Mutharika, who is 85 years old, previously served as president from 2014 to 2020, when he was credited with infrastructure improvements and lower inflation, though he faced criticism for cronyism, Al Jazeera has reported. Chakwera's term saw economic stagnation and slow progress on corruption, factors analysts say influenced the outcome. A drone launched from Yemen struck Israel's Red Sea resort city of Eilat, injuring at least 20 people, 2 seriously, and damaging buildings in the city center. The attack, occurring during Rosh Hashanah, follows previous Houthi drone strikes on Eilat, part of a broader campaign the Iran-backed group says is in solidarity with Palestinians. Israeli air defenses reportedly failed to intercept the drone. The mayor of Eilat called for strong retaliation, and Israel has bombed Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen in response, The Guardian has reported. The strike comes amid Israel's ongoing military offensive in Gaza, following Hamas's October 7th attacks, which has resulted in tens of thousands of Palestinian casualties and mass displacement. Moldova's prime minister warned that Russia is spending hundreds of millions of euros to influence Sunday's parliamentary election, aiming to undermine the country's pro-European trajectory. The prime minister accused Moscow of vote buying, over 1,000 cyber attacks, incitement of riots, and widespread disinformation to weaken the ruling Party of Action and Solidarity, or the PAS, which risks losing its majority. Russia denies any meddling, while Moldova, an EU candidate since 2022, has faced repeated attempts at interference as it shifts westward following the war in Ukraine, the Associated Press has reported. The election is seen as a pivotal choice between pro-European and pro-Russian forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the UN General Assembly, warning that the world is in, quote, the most destructive arms race in human history, and then urging urgent international action against Russia. He accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of seeking to expand the war in Europe, and criticized weak international institutions, including the United Nations, for failing to stop conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, and the Sudan. Zelensky stressed that survival now depends on allies and weapons, declaring, quote, weapons decide who survives. He warned that Russia, if it's not stopped, its operations will continue spreading across Europe, citing the growing threat of Russian drones, the Associated Press has reported. While praising the United States and European support, Zelensky called on all nations to condemn Russia and act to prevent the war from dragging on further. A man in his 40s was arrested in West Sussex, England, over a suspected cyber attack that disrupted several European airports, including London Heathrow, Berlin, and Brussels, during the past weekend. The UK's National Crime Agency said the suspect was released on conditional bail, and the investigation is ongoing. The attack targeted Collins Aerospace Software, which handles check-in, boarding passes, and baggage systems, forcing staff to process passengers manually and causing delays. While most flights at Heathrow were operating normally by Tuesday, Berlin Airport warned of continued disruptions as specialists work to restore secure software, CBS News has reported. European authorities stressed that aviation safety and air traffic control were not affected, though the source of the attack, whether hackers, criminal groups, or state actors, still remains unclear. Denmark reported that drones flying over several airports, including Aalborg and Billund, were likely operated by a, quote, professional actor in a, quote, systematic hybrid attack, though there is no evidence of Russian involvement. The incursions forced temporary closures and flight diversions, posing risks to aircraft during takeoff and landing. Authorities said the drones were launched locally and were not shot down due to safety concerns for nearby populations. The incidents come amid heightened European alert after suspected Russian drones and aircraft entered NATO airspace in Estonia, Poland, Romania, Germany, and Sweden, the BBC has reported. Danish officials and EU leaders are discussing enhanced drone defense measures, while NATO has vowed to use all necessary tools to protect member states' airspace. At least 17 people were killed in Israeli strikes in Gaza on Thursday, including 8 children, as international calls for a ceasefire grew. The deadliest attacks were on a tent house and a house that were struck, and in the southern city of Khan Yunis, where an apartment building was also targeted. Local area hospitals reported multiple casualties and ongoing rescue efforts for those trapped under rubble. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, French President Emmanuel Macron criticized the military campaign, calling it a, quote, failure that cannot end Hamas, and then urged the U.S. President Donald Trump to push for a ceasefire, the Associated Press has reported. The escalating violence underscores the continuing humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip amid stalled peace efforts. South Korea says North Korea is operating 4 uranium enrichment facilities, including the Nonyeongbyon site, signaling a potential expansion of its nuclear weapons program. The North is reportedly producing highly enriched uranium daily, with estimates suggesting a stockpile of around 4,400 pounds, far more than the 550 to 1,100 pounds estimated back in 2018. While the locations of the other undeclared sites remain unknown, experts warn that uranium enrichment plants can be easily concealed, making it hard to verify the number of nuclear weapons North Korea has produced. Kim Jong-un has repeatedly rejected using his nuclear arsenal as a bargaining chip and continues to advance weapons test and missile capabilities, NBC News has reported. Analysts say any future diplomacy would likely see Kim seeking substantial sanctions relief and improved U.S. ties in exchange for only partial denuclearization. 3 women in Argentina, including a 15-year-old, were kidnapped, tortured, raped, and then executed by a local narco gang in what authorities described as an act of narco revenge. The victims were reportedly targeted after being accused of stealing cocaine from the gang. Disturbing details of the murders included one of the girls having her fingers amputated, and another suffering a fractured skull and abdominal mutilation, and a third asphyxiated with a plastic bag. Their deaths were streamed on TikTok, and the bodies were found buried in a garden 5 days after they went missing, the U.S. Sun has reported. 4 suspects have been arrested, while the gang leader, a Peruvian national believed to have orchestrated the killings, still remains at large. Today is September 25th, 2025, and on this day in history in 1789, the U.S. Congress approved 12 amendments to the Constitution, 10 of which would become the Bill of Rights, safeguarding essential freedoms like speech, religion, and due process. In 1775, during the American Revolutionary War, Colonel Ethan Allen was captured by the British after a failed attack on Montreal. His capture underscored the challenges faced by the Continental Army in its early campaigns. And in the year 1956, the first transatlantic telephone cable was activated, revolutionizing global communication by enabling direct telephone conversations between North America and Europe. And September 25th is also National Lobster Day. Alright, it's 20 past the hour, and let's do a quick market update. The S&P 500 is down 0.39%, NASDAQ is down 0.29%, gold is up 0.08%, oil is down 0.36%, Bitcoin is also down 1.70%, and the Dow Jones is down 0.17%. And now here is the U.S. news stories for today. U.S. fighter jets scrambled on Wednesday to intercept 4 Russian warplanes, 2 Tu-95 bombers, and 2 Su-35 fighters, flying near Alaska in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, NORAD has said. The response included an E-3 early warning aircraft, 4 F-16s, and 4 KC-135 tankers to identify and monitor the Russian planes. While Russian activity in the ADIZ is not considered a direct threat, these flights are seen as testing U.S. and NATO readiness following recent incursions in Europe, including Russian drones near Copenhagen and airspace violations in Poland and Estonia. Similar Russian flights near Alaska have prompted NORAD interceptions in recent week, including a dangerously close encounter back in September of 2024, CBS News has reported. The ADIZ requires aircraft identification for national security, but none of the Russian planes have entered U.S. or Canadian sovereign airspace. At a Turning Point USA event at Virginia Tech, Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin honored the late Charlie Kirk, telling students, quote, "All of you are the next Charlie Kirk." Youngkin encouraged attendees to carry forward Kirk's legacy of engagement, faith, and speaking truth in the face of evil, framing it as a national revival, despite Kirk's assassination at a similar event in Utah. He highlighted Kirk's Christian faith and challenged students to actively engage in thoughtful dialogue while standing firm in their beliefs. Youngkin also praised Kirk's widow, Erica, who has assumed leadership of Turning Point USA, Fox News has reported. The event comes amid a heated Virginia gubernatorial race and follows another packed Turning Point USA gathering at the University of Minnesota. President Donald Trump is set to sign a deal allowing TikTok's U.S. operations to be run by a new joint venture company, with ByteDance, the Chinese-based owner, retaining less than 20% of the stock. The agreement, finalized between U.S. and Chinese officials, aims to comply with a 2024 bipartisan law that would have banned TikTok without U.S.-based ownership. American user data will be stored domestically and managed by Oracle, with the platform's algorithm retrained and monitored to prevent outside manipulation. The deal also establishes a board with 6 seats for American investors, including figures like Larry Ellison, Michael Dell, and members of the Murdoch family, NBC News has reported. President Trump emphasized that the deal would protect U.S. national security while keeping TikTok accessible to its 170 million U.S. users. Lawmakers are close to forcing a House vote to compel the Justice Department to release all federal records on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, after Democrat Adelita Grijalva won a special election in Arizona, giving supporters of the discharge petition the critical 218th signature that was needed. The petition, led by GOP Representative Thomas Massey and endorsed by every Democrat plus 3 Republicans, would require the DOJ to make its Epstein-related files publicly searchable, bypassing Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump's allies, who opposed the measure. Grijalva, replacing her late father, has pledged to sign the petition immediately upon being sworn in, potentially setting up a floor vote around October the 20th. Johnson and GOP leaders favor an ongoing investigation led by Representative James Comer, arguing it provides transparency without mandating public release. But petition supporters claim this process allows the DOJ and Trump to withhold information, The Hill has reported. Massey has criticized the curation of documents, citing FBI secrecy over victim-identified names as evidence that wealthy and powerful individuals are being protected from scrutiny. California Governor Gavin Newsom expressed concern that a presidential election may not occur in the year 2028, calling the Trump administration's actions, quote, authoritarian, during a September 23rd appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Governor Newsom cited federal immigration enforcement actions, including arrests in courthouses and other locations, as examples of the administration undermining due process and taking authoritarian measures. He also criticized Trump's redistricting efforts in Texas and is pushing a California redistricting proposal that could add up to 5 Democratic seats in the 2026 midterms. Governor Newsom suggested that President Trump might try to extend his hold on power beyond constitutional limits, though he did not provide any details or evidence on how a 2028 election could be canceled, USA Today has reported. The White House dismissed Newsom's warnings as, quote, absurd and a, quote, conspiracy theory. A hit-and-run in Midtown Manhattan on Wednesday left a 50-year-old woman dead and her 55-year-old husband hospitalized in stable condition. The incident occurred around 2:40 p.m. local time at East 40th Street and 5th Avenue, when a vehicle with a Times Square vanity plate struck the couple who were visiting from Hamburg. Eyewitnesses described the van reversing into the pair before speeding away, prompting a chaotic scene in the busy area. Emergency responders pronounced the woman dead at the scene, while her husband was then taken to Bellevue Hospital, Fox News has reported. The NYPD is investigating through its Highway District Collision Investigation Squad, and no arrests have been made. Residents in San Rafael, California are being warned about an unusually aggressive squirrel that has injured at least 2 people, sending them to the emergency room. The attacks occurred in the Lucas Valley neighborhood, with victims reporting the squirrel biting and clawing them, one even leaping at a woman's face. Flyers in the area cautioned that the animal, quote, comes out of nowhere and has attacked more than 5 people. Wildlife experts say the squirrel's behavior is likely due to being fed and handled by humans as a baby, but it is not rabid, The Guardian has reported. Authorities advise against feeding wild animals, and the city's manager's office has not commented. Lawyers for Luigi Maggione, accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, claim that President Donald Trump and other officials have violated Maggione's right to a fair trial. In court filings, his attorney cited Trump's Fox News interview, where he described Maggione as a, quote, pure assassin, and social media posts from DOJ employees implying his guilt. They also challenged statements linking Maggione to, quote, left-wing extremist groups, arguing that these assertions are false and politically motivated. U.S. District Judge Margaret Garnett warned DOJ officials against making comments that could interfere with the trial, noting that future violations may lead to sanctions, the BBC has reported. Maggione, who is 27 years old, has pleaded not guilty to murder and related federal charges, including firearms offenses, and his lawyers have requested removal of the death penalty. His next hearing is scheduled for December the 5th. Prosecutors are moving to drop charges against Travis Decker, accused of killing his 3 young daughters in May, after the U.S. Marshals Service reported that they believe he is dead. Authorities discovered human remains in a remote wooded area south of Leavenworth, Washington, on September 18th, but DNA tests are still pending to confirm the identity. Decker, who was 32 years old and a former Army infantryman, was accused of suffocating his daughters, Peyton, who was 9, Evelyn, who was 8, and Olivia, who was 5, and whose bodies were found with his truck in the Cascade Mountains. His ex-wife had previously cited worsening mental health and instability, noting he often lived out of his truck, CBS News has reported. Decker's military training in survival and navigation had complicated the search, which spanned months before his presumed death. A suspect is in custody after a stabbing at Carrick High School in Pittsburgh on Wednesday morning, September the 24th, that injured 3 students. The incident occurred around 8:30 a.m. local time, police have said. 2 students were hospitalized with stab wounds to the abdomen. One was in critical condition and one was unstable, while a third sustained a minor laceration and was not hospitalized. A male suspect, who also suffered a cut to his hand, was treated at the scene and then taken into custody for questioning, USA Today has reported. Authorities are investigating the altercation. Alright, I hope you all are enjoying the show so far today. Hey, real quick, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all the other news I got. And here's the last block of news I have for today. Apple has urged the European Commission to repeal or revise the Digital Markets Act, warning that the legislation could force it to halt some products and services in the European Union. The company argued that requirements for interoperability with non-Apple devices are delaying features like live AirPods translation and iPhone to laptop screen mirroring, compromising user experience and privacy. Apple also claimed the rules create unfair competition, citing that Samsung is not subject to the same requirements. The tech giant did not specify which future products might be affected, but suggested that devices like the Apple Watch might not be released under current regulations, The Guardian has reported. The dispute adds to ongoing tensions with Brussels, including Apple's appeal of a €500 million EU fine over alleged App Store restrictions, while U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized European tech regulations as discriminatory against American companies. U.S. stock futures dipped Thursday after a record-breaking rally earlier in the week as investors awaited Friday's release of the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, the Fed's preferred measure of inflation. The cautious sentiment reflects uncertainty over whether recent market gains are supported by fundamentals, with analysts warning that hotter-than-expected inflation data could weigh on stocks. Economic data on Thursday, including existing home sales, jobless claims, durable goods orders, and final Q2 GDP, will further guide market expectations, Reuters has reported. In individual stocks, Intel rose 3.5%, amid reports of talks with Apple over an investment, while Apple gained 0.3%, highlighting ongoing investor interest in tech names. Lithium Americas shares soared nearly 95% Wednesday, after the Trump administration proposed taking an equity stake in the Vancouver-based mining company. The move comes as Lithium Americas renegotiates a $2.2 billion Department of Energy loan for its Thacker Pass lithium mine in Nevada, a key North American source for electric vehicle batteries. The proposed stake would serve as a cash buffer for taxpayers if part of the loan repayment is deferred. This, according to a Trump administration official. Thacker Pass, a joint venture with General Motors, is expected to begin operations in late 2027, with GM holding a 38% stake and committing to offtake from the mine, CNBC has reported. The discussions are ongoing, and Canadian approval may be required. Chinese electric vehicle maker Yang Wang has set a new production car speed record with its U9 Extreme reaching 308.4 miles per hour at the ATP Papenburg testing facility. Driven by German racer Mark Bassing, the U9X surpasses the Bugatti Chiron Supersport 300 Plus's 304.8 miles per hour record from 2019. The EV produces 2,977 horsepower from 4 individual wheel motors and features the world's first 1200-volt architecture, pushing battery limits rather than motor power. Only 30 units of the U9X are planned for production, raising questions about whether they will match the record-breaking configuration, the U.S. Sun has reported. SpaceX launched its 86th Starlink mission of the year Thursday morning, sending 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites into orbit aboard a Falcon 9 rocket from Cape Canaveral. Weather conditions were largely favorable, with a 90% chance of launch success despite some mid- and upper-level clouds. The mission used Falcon 9 booster B-1080, marking its 22nd flight, which successfully landed on the drone ship a shortfall of gravitas about 8.5 minutes after liftoff. This landing was the 126th for the drone ship and the 511th booster recovery for SpaceX overall, Spaceflight Now has reported. The satellites are scheduled to be deployed approximately 1 hour and 4 minutes after liftoff, continuing the expansion of SpaceX's Starlink mega constellation, which now includes over 8,400 satellites. NASA has awarded Arizona-based startup Catalyst Space Technologies $30 million to save its $500 million Swift satellite from falling into Earth's atmosphere by pushing it to a higher orbit. Launched in 2004, Swift has been observing distant galaxies and black holes from low Earth orbit about 364 miles above the planet, but its orbit is gradually decaying due to atmospheric drag, giving it a 90% chance of burning up by late 2026. The mission will demonstrate advanced space docking technology, a capability increasingly tied to U.S.-China competition in space, including satellite servicing and military applications. Catalyst CEO emphasized that Swift was not designed for servicing, with no onboard propulsion or docking points, making this a key test of maneuverable spacecraft technology, Reuters has reported. Modifications to Catalyst's Link spacecraft will begin next month ahead of a planned launch in May of 2026 to complete the orbital boost. Archaeologists in South Sinai, Egypt, have uncovered an ancient Bronze Age copper workshop, a site that is historically linked to the biblical figure Moses. The workshop contained smelting furnaces, ore preparation tools, ceramic cubicles, and clay heads used for furnace nozzles. Several administrative buildings and watch points were also found, showing the area's strategic importance due to copper and turquoise deposits. Officials said the discovery reveals an advanced industrial system for smelting and casting copper, which was then transported to the Nile Valley for tools, weapons, and currency, Fox News has reported. The find is expected to boost cultural tourism and offers new insights into ancient Egyptian activity. Archaeologists in northern Israel have discovered a hoard of 22 bronze coins dating back over 1,600 years ago near an area where Jesus had preached. The coins, from the 4th century AD, were hidden during the Gaullist Revolt, the last Jewish uprising under Roman rule. They were found in a deep crevice at the end of a narrow tunnel, suggesting the owners hoped to reclaim them once the danger had passed. The underground hiding complex also dates back to earlier Jewish revolts, including the Great Revolt, Fox News has reported. Researchers say the discovery could make a major tourist site out of the area, allowing the public to explore its hidden treasures. Okay, everyone, it is 37 past the hour, almost 38 past the hour. That is our show for today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode of The News with BC, and until then, have a great rest of your day.